as a non-music. Thank you very much. It's from Ghana. So we got this thing. I don't know who started it, but all the members in our family have one. And then some
welcome to the first of what we hope to be many old oak lounges, or oak lounge. Yes, actually yes. I'm going to give a round of applause. So the oak lounge came about. Mike's sitting right here. Michael Tabor approached the old oaks and said he's got this idea, and it's based around connecting people, mentorships, giving back to the community, but more than that, giving someone that's left Somerset College something more to look forward to and something to be grateful to the school for. We want the school to be something that you are constantly benefiting from. So as much as you had the education, and obviously, hopefully, you're benefiting from that in your daily life, beyond that, we want to allow the opportunity for people to network, to possibly gain mentorships, to meet people, and hopefully sort of get a foot in the door. So if you're someone that's just left Somerset College, these networking opportunities are great because you can meet someone that could possibly give you that boost that you were looking for. If you've been out of school for longer, then that's also a good way to network, meet different people, meet people in different fields, and that also then brings me to how we chose our panelists and how we sort of came up with this whole idea. The age differences, I think one of the best things walking through tonight was sort of going, what year were you, and then trying to work out where the siblings fit in and how old you were when this one was here. So diversity in terms of age, diversity in terms of the fields in which our panelists are, also the audience, everything is just about showing how diverse the Somerset College community is, and your opportunities after, during, and well, we were saying to Mike, his kids are there now, so in his future. So yeah, that's just really, really good. Then, of course, the APT, so the Acorn Bursary Trust, is about giving opportunities to people and providing a Somerset College education to people that deserve it, that maybe don't have the ability to get it themselves. And that's what we're here for. We're here to give back and to allow more people the opportunities that we were given. And yeah, that's also sort of the mentorship that we want to link up with as well. Giving back, continuously making sure that we are giving back to the communities around us and to each other. So that was really, really important to us. And of course, the Somerset College level of education, as I said, hopefully it has benefited you in your daily lives, but we want to make sure that more people have access to that. And that's why the Old Oaks have really started working close together with the Acorn Bursary Trust. And Mike is on the Old Oaks committee now. I have just realized I never introduced myself. So my name is Alita, and I was class of 2009, and I'm chair of the Old Oaks committee, hence talking about the Old Oaks committee so much. So sorry about that. Then I obviously have to do massive thank yous. First one's this beautiful venue, the fact that we can sit in an actual lounge, and the fact that we can have, the oak, that's really, really cool. And when Mike suggested it, we said to him, Annalena and I didn't want to be too forward, but this is kind of the perfect place. So a massive thank you to Avontuur, to the catering, to the staff. Yeah, we can give a round of applause. Then to the IT and the AV team, Sean, Isaac, and Peter, thank you so much for being here and also for making it possible to sort of live stream this and get it out there afterwards. Transport and sector, Somerset College facilities team, and then admin support. This is a big one, especially from our side. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff happening. We are very, very grateful to the marketing and development office. And then a very big thank you to the panelists for being here. Without you, this would not be possible. And of course to Amata, thank you so much as well for agreeing to host. And then I have a special thank you to Mike and Annalien. Honestly, this would not be here without the two of them. So Mike, for having this as your brainchild, thank you so much. And Annalien is a powerhouse when it comes to anything Old Oaks related. So thank you very, very much. Yeah. So from the Acorn Nursery Trust and from the Old Oaks Committee, thank you very, very much for being here. As I said, the proceeds are going to go to the Acorn Nursery Trust, and we are hoping to have many more of these, and we're hoping to have very interesting panelists each time as we do tonight. So it's very much an open invitation. We want this to be a lounge feeling. We were saying to Amata, if someone wants to get up and do something, if someone accidentally says something, this is your lounge. That's what you get to do. So please get relaxed, have a glass of wine, enjoy your food, and if after this one you have a suggestion or anything that you would like to put forward for next time, we're all ears and we're very, very open to anything. So thank you so much and enjoy the evening.
Access to excellent private education to those that normally cannot afford it. And at ABT we believe that is the area where we can make a difference. We can create future leaders, professionals, and equip students for further tertiary education or whatever they want to do in life. Private individual, corporate, a multinational, a parent, staff member, anybody in the community can make a contribution and can make a difference in the lives of people.
Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to our very first Oak Lounge. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Amata Mirza, class of 2017, and I will be your host tonight. I'm not really sure why they have me up here with these fantastic panelists, but anyway, nonetheless, I'll be here tonight. And I'm going to introduce all of them to you in a moment. But firstly, I just want to say thank you very much to our audience who are on the live stream today, who are joining us from wherever you are. A very warm welcome. And more importantly, to everyone who's here tonight in person, we really appreciate it. I hope you just take a seat, relax, have some wine, have some snacks, and like Alita said, at any point, if you just want to get up, go and take a quick stretch, get some more wine, feel welcome to. This is a very open conversation, a very warm environment, and we don't want you to feel any stress. You know those college assemblies, we don't really want it to be a stiff thing. We want to, I'm sorry, Mr. Sayer, but it has to be said. We want it to be a very, informal thing. And I won't be making any jokes tonight, Mr. Sayer, I'm so sorry about that. I'll be starting introducing our panelists from the far left all the way to my right, to my left here, but closer to me. So we're going to start with Jess Schulschenk. There we go. Class of 2002. She is the director for the Sustainability Institute, a non-profit trust based in Stellenbosch, working in education and research for just and generative futures. She holds a PhD in business strategy from UCT Graduate School of Business, lectures for several executive and postgraduate degree programs in sustainable development, and she heads up partnerships in Africa for the Embedding Project, which is a global non-profit research initiative supporting companies to embed sustainability into core strategy and decision making. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, Jess. Our second panelist over here is Bongi Arosi. He works as an investment consultant at PPS Investments. After studying international relations at Stellenbosch University, Bongi joined Sanlam and worked for Sanlam Life and Glacier by Sanlam. Over the past 6 years in the financial services industry, Bongi has accumulated knowledge about local and offshore markets, financial planning, portfolio management, client management, and marketing. Bongi was assistant rugby coach at Somerset College while he was completing his studies, and he was a trek leader in 2015. As mentor at the Imibala Trust MPO, Bongi is very passionate about adding value and helping people. Thank you, Bongi. Our next panelist is Nicky Newton-King, retired as the Chief Executive Officer of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange at the end of September 2019, after 23 years at the JSE, of which the last 8 were as CEO. She spent much of 2020 during COVID working on a number of South African Inc. issues, including arguing for the enabling of state grants for vulnerable workers and driving the launch of Woza Matrix for free to air on television. Nicky joined the board of Somerset College in May 2015 and became chairman in January 2019. She is also currently a non-executive director of Investec. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Nicky. And last but not least is Justin Stanford. He is an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist from Cape Town. Growing up on a farm, Justin's self-taught interest in early personal computers, software, and connectivity led to him eventually deciding not to complete high school, but rather to pursue a dream of being an internet entrepreneur at the start of the 2000s. He ultimately went on to build a pan-African online software company from a garage in the suburbs of Cape Town in the then emerging cybersecurity industry. Today, he spends his time working on 4DI Capital, a pioneering venture capital firm formed in 2009. Justin is also the co-founder of the Silicon Cape Initiative. Thank you, Justin. So, as you can see, we have some very interesting panelists here tonight from all different backgrounds, and our topic tonight is, what does sustainability mean to you? The Oxford Dictionary actually defines it as the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level, and the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. Now that's all great and well. Thank you, Oxford Dictionary. I don't know too much about sustainability, but I actually kind of want to know what sustainability means to each of the panelists here, because that's after all why we're here tonight. So maybe, Jess, can we start off with you?
Hoping not to be the first. I guess the irony is I'm director for the Sustainability Institute. It's a name that we inherited and not one that I'm a huge fan of, because in many ways to sustain means to keep things the same. And I think if we look around the world today, there's a lot that could merit changing or improving. So sustainability is, for me, absolutely about ecologically regenerative systems. How do we restore this beautiful natural planet that we depend on for life? But it's also deeply about questions of social justice, not just for future generations, but actually for everyone today. So I'll stop it there.
Thank you very much, Jess. I think a very important point that you raised, which we'll get back to the later stage, is just that it's not so much about just, ecological preservation, because I think so many people think, oh, sustainability, recycling, reducing carbon footprint, but there's so much more to it, and I think that's also the value of having so many different people here tonight, having your different backgrounds. So I think, Bongi, what does sustainability mean to you?
So to me, sustainability means leaving the world in a better place than what I found it. And when I rise as an individual, I can rise the person to the right of me and to the left of me. That's what it means to be. And I think to me, it will have a ripple effect once we as a human species start caring about each other more. And then we can attack the things like the environment, the socioeconomic issues that we have in the world. But basically, that's what it is for me.
Thank you. I'm starting to pick up a trend from just 2 answers, but I'm going to get back to it because I really want to know from each of you first before I start asking and probing a little bit. So, Nicky, what is sustainability to you?
So I think that they're absolutely right. But I think if you look at it from a business perspective, I think it's about doing what you do in a manner that enables you to do that better forever. And I think you've got to sort of take agency, you've got to own this responsibility to make a difference, to do it different. I think Jess raised this question of social justice, so that you already picked up the fact that it's way beyond green. I think social justice is important. That's about how what we do impacts all of the stakeholders in society in an equitable manner. I think that's important. So too, as a part of that, is economic justice. So how you do what you do, so that it is fair to everyone. And I think when we start to look at it like that, and we don't just think about it as the loony left or the bunny huggers or it's not. It is about green and it is about social, but it is also about just generally doing what you do fairly, so that your take is actually not more than what you put in.
I think you so beautifully tied Bongi's point and Jess's point together of the theme that I'm picking up on, but I just want to give Justin a chance before I get there.
Well, I spend all my time with my head in the future. That's what I do for a living, and so I'm always thinking about how to make things better. It's an observation of mine that where humans prosper, everything else prospers, because once somebody's basic needs are taken care of, they tend to start looking around themselves and saying, well, maybe I can make my environment better, or I can help my neighbor. So I think it's somewhat to Nicky's point that productive business and creation of opportunity tends to lead to better everything around us. And that's actually where I tend to play anyway. So.
Thank you so much. I think you hit the nail on the head there. You said you spend your time looking towards the future, and isn't that what sustainability really is about? It's about the future, preserving everything now so that there is a future, and we're investing in the future. We're not just putting in what we want to do for tomorrow, what we want to do for next week. It's about the years to come and the people we have after that and the legacy we leave. And I really like that you brought in the thing of it's helping others, it's a community. So I kind of want to start off with how has the Somerset College community, enriched your lives and made you able to do what you do and, brought your passion about for sustainability, or how you bring sustainability into your passion. This can target at anyone who wants to go for it.
Well, I obviously wasn't a Somerset College student, but I had the privilege of leading the board, and what I will say from my conversations with stakeholders, I'm having lots of conversations at the moment with Old Oaks about how the school was created, parents in particular, how the school was created, what the ethos was when it was created. This sense of, we came to do something new, people very interested about what values we are instilling, and that's the values of doing things sort of together is a really important part of, I think, what's in that Somerset College DNA. And I think what we have to do is take that DNA and be saying to all of our family members and our stakeholders, but you know what, we can make a difference. And in fact, not only can we have a responsibility that comes with privilege, relative privilege, to actually make a difference for people beyond ourselves. And I think that is something that comes really strongly through when you talk to many, not obviously everyone, but many Old Oaks, and I think we should nurture that.
Of course, and it's really about innovation and going forward from here. And I think, does anyone want to touch on it before I go on to ask another question?
Well, just listening, it made me think. So I was a founder student there from day one, and the whole concept of Somerset College was about creating something new and doing things in new ways. And I'm a creator. I like to create new things. And I mean, I had the option to go to a traditional school with a long history, but I've never looked backwards. I've always looked forwards. And I think that DNA drew in people with similar mindsets. It drew in people like Dave Wynn, who's sitting here with us, and who embraced mad people like me who had pretty new ideas about what's possible and what could be done. And you mentioned in my bio, I was probably the founding voluntary dropout, or whatever you want to say. I didn't complete the program, but can I just say that I did that with Dave Wynn's blessing, and you know, so that speaks to a mindset that I think is quite novel and pretty progressive for its time.
I'd actually like to ask you, so as much as I've said that sustainability is more just the, ecological side of it, with tech and innovation comes all this, e-waste that's been produced. And I just want to know what your take on it is of all this e-waste that we're producing, and with all these new technologies, you think, okay, better, but I don't know where to stand on that, because now what are we actually leaving behind?
No, that's a very good question. I'm not an expert on e-waste and recycling. I know that the systems exist to do that. I think the world is moving more and more into software and to hyper-efficient platforms. There's this rate of change that's exponential in my industry, in technology, that sees improvements making leaps in orders of magnitude, and the efficiencies that are being extracted are quite incredible compared to, say, 10 or 20 years ago. So I see technology as a force for very positive change and very powerful improvements in humanity and the way we do things. And as you improve efficiency, you tend to improve everything that you draw on, resource-wise, whether it's electricity, physical components, things like that. But I think we're far from perfect yet, but I'm sure that the more our space grows, the more innovation is applied to problem solving, and the more innovative solutions are being created to solve these types of problems.
Of course, and I think as much as we're looking at the technological aspect, we can't just look at the technological aspect alone, because it's not just a singular factor. There's other factors that play into this. So Bongi, I actually wanted to ask you, with your background in the finance services industry, how do we as a society invest in making it sustainable with the tech companies? How do we put, not just the finance side, but, investment is your thing. So that investment's more than just money. It's more than just...
No, definitely, Martha. So, I mean, we look at this quite a lot in terms of, us being on the broker side and dealing with clients, and how technology has become a major disruptor in the way we go about doing our business. And I think we've had to kind of shift our role that we play when it comes to the client, and probably play more of a consultative role than so-called I will sit down with you and I'll tell you where to put your money, etc. Because the client that we have today with technologies enable them to know so much more and look so much further into the future. So the conversations you're having are much different. So you're more of a conduit, I suppose, than an actual someone who's giving hardcore advice, so to speak.
Yes, and you mentioned something about knowing more. It's really about information and the power of information, which kind of takes me to Jess, seeing as you're part of the Sustainability Institute, which looks at research and education. How do we actually, share this knowledge to not only people now, but our future generations, so that they grow up with the habits of sustainability, not just, push for sustainability now. These generations get old, and then we start all over again and try and reinvent the wheel.
It's a really big question. I think two reflections for me is the power of experience. And so it's one thing to talk about sustainability or have people tell you about it, but it's another thing for that to be something that's real to you. And I was thinking on your question earlier, a moment that was really defining for me was doing the trek and spending a month kind of in different forms of nature in the wild. And that laid a seed in me, which was to say that actually these spaces are so important. They have a value beyond what we can kind of put down on a balance sheet. And that was part of my own journey into sustainability, kind of oceanography and a whole bunch of things. And so how do we bring more experiential learning to young people, and not only to those who have the privilege to afford it? And then the other thing, we kind of often think about this, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but Einstein apparently said if he had an hour to solve a problem, he would spend most of it on the question, and then the right answer would come. And so I think education of the past has been very good at teaching us to memorize and regurgitate, and we know that that's no longer fit for purpose. So how do we support young people to develop their own ability to ask better questions? And I think sustainability will be the intuitive path that many people will figure out for themselves if they can develop those competencies.
Thank you. And you said something about, exposing it to those who don't have the resources to actually access it. So how do you think maybe we could actually try and, as a Somerset College community, really to try and push and influence the communities around us to empower them?
I think that's possibly one of the questions that I spend most of my day job thinking about. Mr. Sayer and I have had interesting conversations about I think the importance of things like the Acorn Bursary Trust. So to give people that incredible opportunity. Somerset College gave me such confidence. So I could walk into a boardroom and think that I had something worth saying, even if maybe I didn't. But our education system in South Africa is in absolute shambles. The quality of education that people have access to is shocking, and COVID has only exacerbated that. So some of the kids in the high schools that we support and that are part of our community just down the road are still only going to school 1 day a week. They don't even have the option of taking maths as a subject. So their reality is so different from what we experience 2 kilometers away. I think that we need to work with government to ensure the effective allocation of resources, and we have to make sure that things like nutrition, the arts, sports, all the things that we love aren't stripped out of everyone else's learning experience because they don't have the budget for it. So there's huge room for innovation, and I think that's an exciting call for everyone to get involved. There's great examples, but yeah.
No, thank you for that, and I think there's such a powerful, an innovative mind who wants to push and drive new things, and then someone who can help you invest in the future. But then I want to bring it back to Nicky now, and I want to ask, well, you've had the experience on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. You've kind of get an idea of, you'd understand the corporate world very, very well. And how do you think the corporate world plays a role in sustainability, and do you think they're actually contributing towards it or actually making it so much worse?
Well, so I think that for most people, a company is a more immediate presence than the state. Most of us don't end up in the police station, we don't end up in a state hospital, we end up with our company and going to a shop that is owned, that is a company, etc. So companies have to own their responsibility, that they are in fact the first point of contact for most of us. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to CEOs of listed companies about the responsibility that comes with the privilege of being that first point. And so that conversation goes something along the lines, it's a responsibility that comes with privilege. If you build walls around yourself, if all you think about is yourself and the survival of yourself, you will not survive. You are dependent on your stakeholders and their goodwill, their shopping at your shop, their coming to your school, etc. So you actually have it's in your vested self-interest to develop an acute level of recognition, the fact that you are a part of an ecosystem. And once you realize that, then you realize you need to treat that ecosystem very carefully. And so it's not in the company's interest to go and pollute such that their stakeholders say, I don't actually want to be doing business with you. So once they realize that, they can actually start to put actions in place. But I think for me, the trick is getting people in privilege, whether that's in the company or, for instance, us at college, or the parents and the students at college, whether it's management or the parents or the students, recognizing that we are in a relative position of privilege, that we can make a difference, and not only that we can, but that we must make that difference. And so, Jess was talking about children who have no access to schooling. I mean, this is not something that most Somerset College people would even think about, okay? But, we've just managed to fully fund a Saturday school. That will go live next year, providing support in maths and science and English to disadvantaged schools. That's how you use your position of privilege to make a difference for others. Because if we can get the community stronger, we will all be stronger. Mm. And so it's that type of thinking. And I think that the sort of critical switch is for all of us to realize that we're not waiting for someone else to have that thought. We can make a difference in our spaces, whether that's as a company, whether that's as an investment company, whether that's in our own spaces or as a school. As individuals, we can all make that difference, and we should.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that us as an older community, Somerset College community, have the power to really build sustainable education, provided to people and the communities around us.
Exactly. We could easily have taken a view with college that we've got this incredible campus, and isn't it fantastic? All of us have had the privilege of being in that campus, okay? But that's for people who can afford to pay and for people who are coming to this campus. Or we could have taken the view that we have taken, which is that privilege has a responsibility attached to it, and we have to reach out to make sure that we do our bit to make other people stronger. And that's how we will build this country together if we actually do that. And you can do it, and you should be doing it from your own resources. And I think that's the power that actually most of us don't realize, how much relative resources we have that can be deployed for a much bigger purpose than ourselves.
I think that's so beautiful because there's always such negative connotations that come with privilege, but you're actually you're adding meaning to privilege. You're adding a little bit of substance to what we can do with everything that we've been given, And Bongi, how do you think we can, in the community that we're in, really provide, just from your experience, how can we provide support? How can we better this community?
So for me, it comes down to something both I think Jess and Nicky touched on in this sort of discussions, that there's an underlying theme there, and it's leadership. And for me, that's something I'm really and truly passionate about. And as a young person sitting here today, looking at the world, at our country, at our continent, as a young person, I feel like, leaders we have looked up to have failed us as young people. But there's us here in the now that can make a difference towards the next generation, and that will really truly help, in creating a more sustainable future that we're heading into. But it truly does start with us, every individual person who can make a difference, and you don't necessarily need to do that from a monetary point of view, but it's time, it's whatever resource you can bring to the table from an education point of view, you can do that based on your own experiences, of course.
I think that really backs up what Nicky's trying to say now, because Somerset College is so excellent at producing leaders. We really can just produce leaders, put them out into the world, and everywhere you go, you'll meet someone in a leadership position, and you'll be like, oh, class of 2003, oh, class of 2016, whatever year you are. And because of this leadership culture that we have built, we can really use that to drive innovation, to strive for, making education accessible and sustainable, and challenging corporate environments, because just because we haven't been in the corporate environment, does it mean we can't challenge them? Does it mean we can't bring questions to them? Does it mean that we can't tell them, listen, this is what your structure is now? What if we change that structure? What if we completely flip it around and bring something new? Because just because it's new doesn't mean it's wrong. So what do you think about innovation in that sense of trying to challenge, not necessarily creating from scratch, but taking something and just changing it slightly?
Well, I've always been a fan of tearing up the rule book. So I guess you could say I'd have a positive response. I really like, what the other panelists have had to say. The times we live in call for pragmatic solutions, not for abstract, waffle. The point was made that we live in nobody's an island. We live in, an economy is simply the interrelationship of people. We're all somewhat dependent on each other and each other's well-being, and I think that's a very important point. Much of the work that I've been doing, I really hope has ultimately this widespread beneficial effect. A lot of it's been achieved by tackling what was viewed as being difficult or impossible and just saying, well, that was the old way of thinking. We've got a different way of thinking, and we're just going to try. And a big part of trying is failing. And there's, for the longest time in South Africa, been a stigma around failure, which I think is wrong. And the Americans in Silicon Valley really get this right. They're more than happy to fail. In fact, they have entire conferences called fail cons all around celebrating people who tried and failed, because there's so much to learn from it. So we should not be afraid to fail. We should be willing and able to try. That does take leadership, because it is a risk. What is a leader? A leader is someone with their own ability to think, to come up with novel ideas, and not to be shackled by the past. And that's why I said earlier, I spend no time looking back at the past. That's gone. I spend all my time looking forward and thinking about how could things be. Never mind the past and what's happened. Never mind the constraints we impose upon ourselves based on the paradigms of today. Those are so often just self-imposed constraints. We need to be willing to tear up the rule book, forget about what's gone behind us, not complain, and think about what can we do that's constructive, that's pragmatic, that's effective, that's going to make our country and our world a better place, because that will ultimately benefit all of us.
I think I'm really fascinated by the point of, well, firstly, you'd like to just get rid of the rules. But I'm really fascinated by the point of failure because, I mean, my fields of interest are psychology, so I enjoy human behavior. And I just feel like after this whole COVID pandemic, everyone's just gone into their now, I don't want to fail. I don't want to go back out there after COVID, after people have not seen me for so long. I don't want to fail. I want to make sure I put my best foot forward. And how do we, unteach that pattern? How do we relearn? How do we try and get people to think of new ways when they're just so scared out of the new old way?
It is a tricky thing because as we are not hardwired as a society to tolerate failure, I've actually always wanted to have people who've got some battle scars in my team. And people when they do have battle scars, they minimize them, so because you don't want to be too vulnerable to a new employer, but you do actually need to have those. I think one of the ways to start to allow people to be open to failing is to actually sort of reflect on the things that you might have done that haven't worked fully, and then that sort of creates a permissive space to sort of say, well, hold on, we've also stepped up from time to time. But you should be actually willing to dare. Who dares wins, you know what I mean? You should be prepared to sort of dare and go and do the audacious. But coming back to this point on sustainability, if we can create youngsters for whom the aspiration is about doing better for others and not measuring their worth in terms of the number of zeros in their bank account, I think we will have really created something quite special. So I think schools, homes, the environments in which we live have a lot to speak to add to that. Interestingly enough, in COVID times, I do think people have realized that there are other people that they're dependent on and other people they can make a difference on. So perhaps some of that they might not want to fail, but some of it is a recognition that we're all in this together is also definitely come up in this time.
Thank you. That's a very good point that you brought up there. And I actually made me think of, Jess, I wanted to ask you, maybe you could have an answer for me, is how can we, really use your power, if I can say, at the Sustainability Institute, not only to educate now the Somerset College community, but pass on the skills to the Somerset College community, to pass it on to any other education systems, the schools around us, the universities around us. Because I think, yes, schools are great, we've got education system right there, but universities have the numbers of the students that are willing to learn, wanting to learn, and wanting to make a difference.
So I don't have an answer, but I have a reflection, which is when I was leaving high school, my mom, some of you might remember or know her, Gail Schulschenk. So she was terrifying on a good day, but and I'm very curious if she's watching. So a few things happened that really upset her in my high school career. The one was we did aptitude tests, and I ticked all the boxes that said I like stapling and children, and so it said I should be like a secretary or a kindergarten teacher. And my mom panicked because she'd obviously been part of building a school so I could get a great education, so those would not be my career options. Which, in reflection, I think early learning is probably one of the greatest investment areas we should have as a country. And so as young people leaving Somerset College, so she sent me for a whole bunch more aptitude tests, which basically said I could do anything except be an opera singer. And I probably could have told that person the same thing. But she spent a lot of money on this. And so as we leave Somerset College, we're incredibly empowered. We have these skills, these confidences, these competences to take on the world. And then you're left with this kind of, it feels like the ground is shaky underneath you, because what are you going to do? And I'm grateful that we went through school without social media, because I had nobody else to compare myself to. And I think of people graduating, youngsters from Somerset College today, it looks like everyone else has it figured out. And all of those predefined career paths, my mom was convinced I should be an actuary or a doctor. And so when I broke it to her that I wanted to be an environmentalist, I was going to study oceanography, again, she kind of panicked. And she was like, but you're not going to make any money. And I was like, well, I'm also not going to be happy. Like, those aren't things that feed me. And so as young people, we're having to not just convince our parents, but actually convince ourselves that we can carve out our own journeys, that we can make a difference. And so I guess my biggest, my reflection is to follow what you're passionate about. And if that takes you into business, amazing, do awesome stuff in business. If that takes you into education, kick ass over there. So it should be like, what is that internal fire that's lit for you? And less about what everyone else is saying you should be doing. Because you've got an amazing education, you're going to do good at whatever you do, but do something that really speaks to you. And I think the invitation is there for all of us, because the challenges are pretty big. So we're going to need some really cool people taking them on.
And that's so awesome, because I think, you know, with all the different backgrounds, when you follow your passion, look at the different, like this very diverse panel that we have here today, all talking about the same topic, but from their different perspectives, and how actually interlink. So no matter what you end up choosing, you still come back together as a community to work on issues and handle topics and really, you know, get down and dirty with trying to break down those rules, you know, throw the rule book out the window. I think I'm going to take a thing or two from you. Maybe I should start ignoring rules a little bit more. You seem very chuffed with yourself now. Maybe that's how we're going to do it. We're actually going to educate people to stop looking at the rule book, which is also very difficult with sustainability, because what is the rule book? The world is ever changing. We don't know. The rules obviously would have to be ever changing because, well, first now we've had a pandemic, so, you know, everyone shut down, companies shut down, the carbon emissions are going down, and I'm going to bring it back a little bit more to the green side of sustainability. You know, we're trying to restore the earth, but naturally the earth started restoring itself because people just weren't doing the damaging things that they were doing before. So, you know, with the change, that maybe, I think, Jess, coming from the Sustainability Institute, I don't want to target you, but coming from there, you have a little bit more of the green side in your background. So how do you think we can move forward now from this pandemic with everything opening up again, people are getting vaccinated and really opening the economy back up? How do we open the economy back up without destroying our, you know, future again?
So I wish I could say that during COVID we reduced our global environmental impacts. We didn't. We had stuff delivered to our houses. So we actually saw an increase in carbon emissions from road-based transit, even though we saw international travel drop. We're just about to have the next meeting of the COP summit starting at the end of October. And it's a massive call to action. So basically, governments and countries are coming together and saying that this is the decade of decisiveness, the decade of action, whatever you want to call it. But we have the next 9 years to turn the global economy around and fundamentally change the way in which we use resources. All the predictions are, if we don't, we're heading for a really, really difficult set of conditions in which those who have the resources to protect themselves are going to have to spend it on that. And a lot of everyone else is going to be in really uncomfortable, it's kind of the polite version of where we're going. So I think Nicky might see this a lot more with the companies that she works with. We're seeing really bold targets being set to be net carbon neutral by 2050, to halve carbon emissions globally by 2030. We're seeing companies trying to figure out what it means to be restorative when it comes to big issues like biodiversity, water basements and catchment areas. And from our research and what we're seeing, people are really grappling with how do we do that in a way that builds jobs and doesn't restore the economy to what it has been and what it is, but actually fundamentally tries to figure out how we can have an inclusive economy, because we don't really have that at the moment. So I think Nicky could probably speak to this better, but there's some big, big work underway. And I wish I could say that foxes in the streets was enough for us to feel like under COVID and lockdown, we had some sense of restoration, but the trend, the overall trend is quite a steep downward spiral at this point. It's the point when I get chucked off the stage for being really pessimistic.
But Jess is absolutely right on that. I mean, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, 17 goals and at least a third of them are on environmental things. And I think there are a couple of things to think about here. Firstly, as individuals, we can make a difference. We can demand that Woolworths doesn't wrap their stuff in plastic. I'm just using an example. We can take action with our purses to make sure that our suppliers behave in a manner that is consonant with a much more responsible way of doing business. And we're talking green, but it could be on child labour, it could be on the salaries, it could be how quickly you pay a small supplier, okay? We have power just as consumers. Then if you just look from a green perspective, there are big targets for financing organizations now on whether or not they are going to, support coal-based funding, how they're going to reduce that, because you can't just sort of stop funding coal, but especially in a heavy carbon economy like ours. But how are you going to do that responsibly? So there is a big thread there, and the point of this is that the banks are doing that themselves because they are under pressure to be in the same peer group globally. But then again, all of us who work have saved our money in our pension funds. Our pension funds hold shares in companies. How many of us actually say to our pension trustees, how are you going to vote on X bank's carbon policy or Y company's green policy? How many of us actually have that conversation? We forget completely that we actually own these companies, that we have power as shareholders, and we should in fact be saying, you know what, we actually want to be a little bit activist here and not rely on Just Share and others who are doing a magnificent job challenging behavior of corporates. But we should in fact as shareholders say to our pension fund trustees, we want you to be now taking action on certain, and the more active we get, the more companies will take it seriously and start to change their behavior.
There was so much to unpack in that, and I just feel like I have so many questions I want to ask, but I am very mindful of time, and I actually want it not to be just a conversation between us. I actually want to engage the rest of the room now, if anyone else has questions. Unfortunately, I don't think I can ask people from the live stream to be asking questions. It will be a bit difficult, but you're more than welcome to put your questions in the comments, and maybe our panelists can come for a second round, or you can come in person next time. But the people here who are actually in the lounge, are there any questions from your side that you want to ask for the panelists? I don't want to miss a hand or anything. I'm trying to scan the room as quickly as possible.
You might have sprung that on them and they're not quite ready.
No one is ready to ask
I
questions.
I'll just, while they think of their questions, I'll build on what's been said here, because a lot of good things have been said. And I often think, to Nicky's point, when I was in school at Somerset College, there was no such thing as organic products on the shelves of Woolworths. Why is there today? Because of consumer demand and shifts in our buying patterns. So it's a real concrete example. Today that's commonplace everywhere. That came into life not because someone decreed it should be so, but because over time consumer attitudes shifted and demand patterns shifted. So there's a huge amount of power in the individual, in how you spend, in what you choose. And a lot of that comes down to education. I think when I was a child, the biggest environmental threat was the hole in the ozone layer. There might be people here who never even heard of that. But that was the biggest ecological threat we faced. And awareness of that was spread, and before we knew it, the right chemical was changed in all the fridges, and the problem somehow moved on. And a solution was found, and consumers were encouraged to buy only CFC-free fridges. So I think that's very important. Another thing that Jess made me think about, talking about how we, deliveries and so on picked up and all that. I really think to counter the gloomy possible scenario, again, I'm going to speak from my corner in the technology space, but I really think that great entrepreneurs with amazing technology are going to find solutions to all these problems. And people like me are trying to raise money to give to these kind of people. And an example comes to mind on the delivery side. We've just invested in a company that's building airships, which you might know as a Zeppelin or a blimp, about the size of this lounge, that float, not fly, just under natural helium gas flotation, and travel with a little bit of electrical power, which is generated by solar panels on the top, so provided by the sun, and can make deliveries up to hundreds of kilometers away entirely autonomously on their own, and can even get to remote areas. So that is FedEx aircraft or UPS vans or courier guy vehicles that are just not going to be needed that can get medical supplies, food, or whatever it is that you like, into all sorts of areas. So it's just an example that I'm living with right now that's very real, being built here in Stellenbosch, of how great minds are thinking of solutions that are not just sustainable and actually solve those problems, but are also viable as businesses, and there's actually demand for what they do.
So we do have a question over here, yes.
So, I mean, I agree with you, Justin. I like the concept of building up a good, sustainable green business, but part that concerns me often with green project businesses is that they don't make scientific or engineering sense. So that part concerns me because it becomes a facade, it becomes a marketing scheme rather than anything else, something to make people feel good about themselves. How do we stop the green initiative or the push for environmental success from becoming a corporatized facade rather than following good actual scientific practices? And I can name hundreds of examples where that's the case.
Yeah, to respond to that, I don't invest in any green businesses, actually. I just think that good businesses will form to solve real problems for which there is a need. If humanity has a problem that needs solving, great entrepreneurs will legitimately solve them and don't need a facade of anything to do so. There might be other reasons to put up facades to attract certain type of funding or something like that. But certainly in my line of work, we're just looking for legitimate businesses that can be successful entirely on their own 2 feet. And what I'm illustrating is just that it's a side effect that these other benefits come to bear. And as we evolve in our patterns of demand and our thinking, what we need, so solutions emerge spontaneously from the market, from the creativity of people's minds.
Sorry,
not at all, but it's actually a very good question, because I think the issue can be clouded by branding, whether it's branding of green or something else. It can get in the way. I think there's roles to be played for all of those elements, but it's actually a very good point that we need to focus on things that are truly viable and themselves are sustainable.
Yeah.
Do we have any further questions from the audience at this time? No, okay, then my other question for your follow-up. Had to give everyone else an opportunity, but I wanted to ask, so with this notion of going green, there's almost this thought that now it means going more expensive, and is this a misconception? And if this isn't a misconception, then how do we make this more accessible to everyone?
Are you asking me?
Well, anyone, but I was going to come to you first.
Look, I think anything new starts expensive, but tends to trend down in price. So let's look at electric cars. So there's a great entrepreneur, Elon Musk, applying novel technology to a problem. And the first Tesla cost, $200,000, and it was only for elite people who could buy one. But elite people have the money to go and buy one, and in turn, that money was used to invest in R&D, and slowly it's trickling down, and now you can buy a Tesla Model 3. Unfortunately, not in our country yet, but point being that there's no reason why these things need stay expensive if they are structured in a way that is viable, that is sustainable. Things should get more accessible to a broader audience over time.
Perfect. Jess, did you raise your hand?
To add to that, I think what's important to take into account is externalities. And so when, for example, someone in Mexico can buy a bottle of Coke cheaper than they can access drinking water, something in that value chain is not being accounted for. And so insofar as we don't have the right pricing, the right legislation, and we're not paying the true cost of what some products cost, we may have this perception that sustainable could be more expensive. It's not always the case, but I think it's because there's a lot of costs. As taxpayers, for example, we're taking on the cost of carbon. So our tax money goes to setting up infrastructure that is really about single-use vehicle or like single occupancy vehicles, as opposed to investing that into public infrastructure and public transport. And so those are decisions that are being made at a policy and at a national budget level that as consumers we don't always have direct control over. And so we are not always able to, I agree with you, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's a lot of bigger system dynamics that we need to take into consideration. And I think that's where we have to exercise our role as citizens in the kinds of companies we support, the way in which we invest, our whatever savings or pension funds we have. But we also need to be asking different questions. And so that could be to local government or different places. I feel very disempowered in South Africa because I don't feel that my voice makes a difference. And yet I'm one of the people with a lot of voice. So we have almost 75% youth, what's been classified as underemployment. So it's a kind of almost a truer measure of unemployment. And I think the other question for me is we've largely externalized our youth from participating in saying what their needs are, and they're very unmet. So there's a lot of bigger system things at play that make kind of the market and simply just developing business solutions, it's important and it's going to help us advance, but it's not enough by itself.
Thank you so much for that insight on it. I think it's, one thing that I'd really take away from that is us as citizens need to really take the action and be mindful and educate ourselves about who we're buying from, what kind of, economy we're contributing towards. I think we only have time for one more question, so I want to give an opportunity to the audience again before we try and wrap up. So if there's anything from this side. Okay, so I'll make it 2 quick questions. So I'll give you a chance, and then Jess wants to ask Bongi a question.
Okay, so this is for anyone, but based on what you've just said now and about what Jess has said and just everybody else, it comes down to the decision-making process of the individual as well as the group as a whole, right? In which case the whole becomes even more important that we as a whole can make decisions amongst ourselves. But here's the question: how do we dodge the obfuscation of the reality? Because quite often companies are very, very good, and governments are quite good at hiding what the truth behind something is. So let's use something like Nike, for example. Nike ran a multi-billion-dollar marketing campaign about sustainable shoes that they were developing. When you actually went and tracked down information about it, not at all, not even remotely. And it was back to consumer spending versus throw away old Nikes, buy these things, make yourself feel better, make the government feel better, nice branding, nice company thing. But we as a consumer have been conned into buying something. How do we dodge that? Because even at a corporate level, even on the JSE sends documentations and information, they're lying there to their consumers, or obfuscating it, not lying, they're obfuscating it in that information pack that nobody's going to read. How do we make an informed decision about what we buy?
Before anyone answers the question, I'm just not sure if the live stream was able to hear that without the mic, so I'm just going to try and summarize your question and also give you a chance to think of an answer. But essentially what has been asked is, how do we really know we're making informed decisions about buying sustainable and, investing in sustainable companies when it could be just in the terms and conditions that nobody really reads. Let's face the facts. Maybe some people might start reading it, but you don't read the full terms and conditions. So how do we know we're really investing in these companies that are green and sustainable, or the products that are so-called labeled sustainable, when we're not actually doing the full investigation into it, and we're not just being conned into buying these things and promoting, bad habits?
I don't think there's a sort of singular answer on that, but I think we have to become more informed as consumers. And I think the more informed we are, the more we will get suppliers to be more transparent and less greenwashy about what they're doing. But we do actually have to become informed. And the reality is that I don't know any consumer that is going to go through line by line by line by line, or even has the technical ability to do that. So you do actually come back to the fact that there are people who do have technical ability to do that. So when you get the specialist sustainability practitioners who can actually crowd in expertise to challenge a particular thing, then you get the insight from that. And I think we must just become much more sort of aggressive as consumers about what matters to us and what type of disclosure we want. And when we find that people are greenwashing, then to sort of expose that and say that isn't actually in anybody's interests, really.
And I really like what you said, there's no one singular answer, but unfortunately we don't actually have time for many more answers than that. So I guess you wanted to say one more thing to Bongi, I think it was.
Yeah. So I feel like you're a younger, and I'm going to say better looking version of a Somerset College graduate. I'm sorry, Justin, Marsha, but like, you're the youngest, I think. I think as you go on in your work and your career, you become maybe disillusioned or jaded or a bit more hardcore in some of your perspectives. So I guess my question to you is, of all the things that are unfolding, and maybe as a kind of to share with those who are in the online space as well, like, what excites you about the future?
I think what excites me about the future, and I actually was privileged enough to have a conversation with a couple of guys who were younger than me, about, let's say, 8 years my junior, and just to think of the different way in which they were thinking about the world to maybe what or some of my peers were thinking about the world, and how much more brave they were in terms of challenging injustices, that many of us have sort of just accepted as part of being our norms. And that for me excites me, in the way in which they talk about the future. And I say to many young people that I have conversations with, as young people, let's stop waiting for someone to give us opportunity. Let's stop waiting for someone to employ us. How about we sit amongst ourselves and think of how we can create a better future for ourselves? And I think that is really the true essence of where, we'll sort of determine our own futures and really take accountability for what it is that we're trying to achieve and what that we're trying to, sort of fight against. Because I do feel like we're in a fight of sorts. And if the buck doesn't stop with us, what are we going to leave for our future children and their future kids? Yeah.
I think for a topic that has so much potential to really weigh you down and scare you about the future, that was such an optimistic ending. So thank you so much for that answer. Thank you to our audience here today and those who are actually joining us on the live stream. We really appreciate you being here tonight. And thank you to these amazing panelists alongside me. I am actually going to hand over back to Alita to just finish off for us and, just wrap up the evening.
Firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the panelists, and Marta, you were brilliant. Thank you so much for leading that so well. So a huge round of applause to all of you. Then, do we still have the live people? We do. Thank you very much for watching. And then for the audience that are here, thank you so much. And for those that are online, if you are in the country, or maybe I should say if you are in Cape Town, hopefully we'll see you here next time. If Mike agrees to Avontuur again, that would be great. No, just again, thank you so much everyone for being here. I cannot say thank you enough to all the people that were involved to make this possible. And I can't agree more with Amata that what a beautiful way to end the night. Bongi, that was a really, really good way to end it. I think sustainability is something that's quite intimidating, and we were very excited to see how it was going to be unpacked, and you definitely did not disappoint. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Once again, there's going to be a video for the people watching online about the Acorn Bursary Trust. For those that are here, I think a lot was spoken about tonight, about the power that we have, the ability that we have to give back, the ability that we have to empower other people. Let's use that. Let's support the Acorn Bursary Trust where we can. Let's keep the Oak Lounge going. And yes, thank you very much for being here.
My name is Akanya Tochun Bengashe. I was born in Cape Town and lived with my mother in Parklands. It's in like Globig area.
Hi, I'm Monique Tolkien, and I'm originally from Johannesburg, a small little town called Randfontein.
And I'm Bongi Arosi, past pupil at Somerset College, class of 2010. I grew up actually not too far from the school, just down the road, Avontuur Estate. And I went to one of the farm schools there called Tonko Bosman.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Solomons, known as the dancer everywhere I go. I grew up not too far from here in Somerset West, just a small town just outside Somerset West called Macassar. Born, bred, raised in the area.
My mother and my father weren't married, so they kind of like didn't live with each other. So I just lived with my mother in Tableview, and I went to Tableview Primary. in grade 2 until grade 7.
Well, growing up, it was always like a bit confusing because my dad's white, my mom's coloured, and then also the family dynamics, the racial slurs coming from both sides. So you never really knew as a child where you fit in with all of that. So it was a bit difficult.
Yeah, so my dad early days was, and then he sort of went off and we went our separate ways, my mom and I, so she basically raised us as a single mother.
Well, my mother, she's a single parent, so I always looked up to her. She was my role model, and she's kind of like a hero to me because she has to take care of not only me but also my family back at home.
So I mean, I came from very humble beginnings, as my mom was a domestic worker, so she certainly didn't have the funds, but tried her best, to make sure that I had everything that I needed.
Somerset College has got this great opportunity. There's a bursary they want to give to talented kids in order to obviously focus on academic excellence, but also kids that they can see, are promising in talents.
I can't really put words together to describe how I'm amazed I was with the campus, with the scenery, with the mountain at the back.
And you think to yourself, horses, vineyards. This is weird. This is weird.
The students and the staff made it quite easy for me to kind of fit in.
Yeah. I mean, I was blessed to have incredible support at the school.
At Somerset College, there is a great support system. There are people who are willing to help and who are there for you, and they're not doing it out of pity or because they, want to help you. If it's like a charity case or anything, they actually help you because they really love you. And then I moved to the boarding house in grade 9.
The only reason I really enjoyed high school was mainly because of the boarding house. It was just having another family away from home. It was just a great thing to have.
A real standout in just the Somerset College community was that, I felt I belonged. At no point did I feel like, I was an outsider coming in just for a short while and, that was going to be that. I really formed part of the community, and like I said, just from teachers to actually support staff to obviously the students themselves, everyone was part of that, or part of my journey.
If I think about a highlight or a moment at Somerset College that prepared me for life, the challenges, the good and the bad, would definitely have to be Trek.
The best experience was probably Trek, going on Trek.
But Trek.
I think Trek definitely is another standout for me.
Trek teaches you things. I mean, I still talk about it today with friends. People that knew me from high school and obviously new friends that came into my life in university. I would definitely say Trek, because for those 27, 28, 29 days, you are with a group of other people that some you want to be with, others you don't want to be with, and you just all stuck together, on this life journey that you don't realize how big of an impact it is until, you learn the lessons later. But just that whole experience of finding yourself and discovering who you are, what you like, having to learn that perseverance and how to look after yourself. And I always say the biggest lesson for me looking back was, and it was something so mundane, to put on that backpack and they tell you can only put in the backpack what you can carry. That to me, I always use that as a lesson, and I say that is such a great metaphor for life. Don't take on anything that you can't, and remember to carry only what you're capable of carrying.
I mean, I definitely cannot speak of Somerset College without mentioning the teachers. They are definitely the unsung heroes of my entire journey, at Somerset College. From molding me in the classroom to out on the sports field.
ACU, Ms. Vari, Imibala, the art classes, they were all like big impacts in my life. It would build me up as a person as well, because they were the first few people who I led in, who I trusted.
In my family, I am the first person to go to university, so this is all possible through my sponsorship and the education I got from Somerset College to be able to get accepted into the degree I wanted and into the actual university. It made my family proud.
I 110% believe, not even think, that opportunities like the ABT should continue or should still be offered. And the reason I'm saying that is, when I look back at where I started, I didn't even know the opportunity existed.
Being able to go to Somerset College did have a big impact on who I am today, because I think if I had to stay in Macassar, I think all my dreams would have died. Like, my spark would have ended.
I mean, I would definitely like to extend a huge thank you to the ABT. I mean, without it, I wouldn't be where I am today, without the funding and support. Yeah, and I would one day, if I was in a fortunate position, to help someone else achieve and realize their potential, as ABT has helped me realize mine.